All right, hello everyone, and welcome to the video on creating KPIs or key performance indicators in Tableau. Um, so for this video, I've already opened Tableau. We're going to use the sample Superstore dataset because everybody has access to that, and we're going to build some KPIs. So we're going to create first we're going to create a basic KPI scorecard, and I'm going to show you how to do that. And then we're going to build on our knowledge from there. So let's get started. Select the sample Superstore dataset, and let's start building. So from the dimensions pane, drag category to the rows. So if we go over here into dimension, category into rows, and region into columns. So now we have created basically this region by category, but we need some measures here. So let's add sales. So this is text. ABC means the visualization is kind of screaming for some text. Let's add sales into the text box. So just basically click sales, drag it to text. I think if you double click, if you double click, it just goes into text as well. But just drag this into text or double click, and now your table is populated. So now we have a region and category for the furniture, office supplies, technology, and the sum of sales for each region and each category. So now let's create the calculated field using the sales figure. So what we want to do is select analysis and create a calculated field. And this is basically how you create your first KPI. So name this KPI, or you can name it whatever you want. My first KPI. Let's just go with that. And this is basically the formula box. So we're going to do a little formula like Microsoft Excel style. So you want to do an if statement. So basically you can type if, or you can select from the drop-down, whichever you prefer. You want to do sum of sales, and it will populate like that, because that's what we're looking at, sum of sales. And this KPI, basically we're going to set a benchmark for this KPI. You can, in business or the real world, you can set whatever KPI that's basically your indicator for performance. I don't really know a lot about this data, but I'm just going to go ahead and set it at 160,000. You can set it whatever you want. This is just your, you should probably base this on some kind of data. But we're going to go ahead and set it at 160,000. And what you want to type, if the sales is greater than or equal to 160,000, which we're going to call above our benchmark. So we'll just type above benchmark. The 160,000 is going to be our benchmark. And this is just a string. You can call this whatever you want. You can say like, wow, or super, or whatever you want. So I'm just going to, for the purposes of the benchmark concept, I'm just going to say above our benchmark. Then you want to do else. So otherwise, then this is just going to be just a simple if statement. So if sum of sales, so if the sales are greater than or equal to $160,000, then we're going to label that above our benchmark. Otherwise, we're going to say below, below benchmark. And then we need to close the formula. So type end. And of course, you have to check your formula. Sum of sales. Let's see what the errors are. So basically the error is with this open parentheses. Of course, that's all the programming errors are just something simple. So you make sure sum of sales, we had it at sum of, basically there's no closed parentheses. So if the sum of the variable sales, which is what Tableau calls this variable, is greater than or equal to 160,000, then we're going to label this as above our benchmark. Otherwise, we're going to label it as below our benchmark. Okay, so confirm that the calculation is valid, and I'm glad that we had an error there so you could kind of see what was going on, and I'm glad it was a simple error also. So click apply, and you'll notice that, and then click OK. Now under measure, you can say my first KPI. So you can, again, we named it my first KPI. You can change it all you want. Maybe we should have named it something like benchmark or something like that. Yeah. So now let's implement this KPI. So go to the marks card and then select shape. So basically what we did is we don't have that button. So you want the KPI to actually stand for something. And again, the labels are a string. So if you go edit again, the above benchmark label is a string because it's in quotations. And you want to actually add that label. So what we're going to do is kind of associate that benchmark with a shape. So you want to, in the marks card, select shape, drag this KPI into shape. And now we're going to say, here's our label, square and circle. Circle's above benchmark. And it doesn't make a lot of intuitive sense. So let's change the shape. So click on shape, click on above benchmark. I don't know about you, but when I think of a circle, I don't really think of success, basically. So above benchmark means good, and below benchmark means bad. So we're actually going to go, and Tableau has this default shape palette. We're going to select KPI. So now these are a little more conducive to success. So basically, under this little shape palette, select KPI, and then under select data, you want to have above benchmark highlighted, and then click the green check mark, and you notice that the shape right here changed. So now the above benchmark is going to be a check. And then what do you think the below benchmark? Oh, I misspelled this. I'll fix that in a second. So below benchmark, I'm telling you, you can type anything right here. Let's call that an X. So you want to click apply and then click OK. So you can kind of see the shapes in here, but there's some text. But first I'm going to edit this. So below our benchmark is not correct. So all you do is click apply, and now it says, so if you go back to shape, you'll see it says below benchmark, KPI, red X, apply. Okay. Now that we have the shapes, remember our KPI was the green for the green check mark for above 160K and red for below 160K. So we need to get rid of this text. So on the marks card, click label and unclick show mark labels. And now we have kind of the simple way to say check, 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 XXX versus when it was just, you know, the numbers. If you had a gauge of the numbers and what they mean, now we assume that 160K means something, and now we can have these little checks. you can increase the size here as well. And this is change the size also here, change back the size here, and so does that make sense? So you just kind of play around with how you want everything to look. So that's a simple KPI there, and feel free to format the text also if you want to make the text larger. So it's really easy now to see furniture, central, east, and west all are above our benchmark, and then south gets the red X and it's below the benchmark. Okay, so let's save this as the sales, sum of sales KPI, and let's create another KPI. Okay, so what we're going to do now is build on this simple knowledge here and create a profitability KPI dashboard. So we're going to make 3 graphs. One of them is profitability by item, profitability details, and profitability by category. So this first graph, we're going to do profit by item. And let's go ahead and start from there. So let's create a new calculated field, a new KPI called Profitability KPI. So go to Analysis, click Create Calculated Field. We're going to call this Profitability KPI. And like we did last time, we're going to add the formula. So what we want here is a formula based on profitability ratio. So let's get the formula for profitability ratio. And this is a pretty simple formula. It's sum of profit. I guess we already have a profit ratio, but let's just go ahead and do it. Close the parentheses, divided by sum of, you guessed it, sales. Close parenthesis. And we're just going to name this is not the KPI, so we're going to name this profit ratio. Looks like we already have one over here, but let's just do it this way. I'm going to name it profit ratio 2, click apply, click OK. Now we can feel good about ourselves that we created the profitability or profit ratio. So what we want to do before we create our KPI is let's format the profit ratio. So what you want to do is go, you could do either one, but since we created this one and we want to feel good about the KPI, so let's go ahead and format this one to a number format, which it already is, to 2 decimal places. So you need to right click on this one, go to default properties, and go to number format, and go to percentage. So you want to make this a percentage because it'll just give you a number. And this is a good way to understand how to format numbers as well. And then replace 0 with 2. So we're going to go out to the nearest 2 decimal point. So now it kind of fits that profit ratio 2. We can just say this is going to the 2 decimal points. So now we need to create our KPI. So let's do that again. Go to Analysis, Create Calculated Field. Now this will be the Profitability KPI. So for this formula, let's use our profit ratio. So let's create an if statement. So I'm going to create a KPI for anything above 40%, we're going to call awesome. So a profit ratio above 40%, then I'm going to say this is amazing. So let's do another if statement. So you want to do if our variable here for the percentage and to the second decimal point, then if profit ratio is greater than or equal to 0.4, so 40% basically, because our number needs to be a percentage. Then let's just type a string. I'm going to type awesome because it's fun. You can create whatever you want to do here. Now we're going to do else if. So if it's above, greater than or equal to 40% profit ratio, then we're going to label it as awesome. Else if the profit ratio is greater than or equal to 0.2%. So this is going to be kind of the mediocre. So awesome is going to be labeled green. And this is going to be So I'm going to do then. So that's kind of our yellow. Maybe we should look at this. It seems okay. And then else, I'm going to call it horrible. Of course, it might not be horrible, but I think it's more fun because you can name it whatever you want. But if you're doing this in a professional setting, maybe you should create something like good or needs more work or something like that. So apply. Else horrible. What's our error here? If at character 0. So basically I got this error message, and of course it's something silly. So else if, you don't need a space here. You just need that. So that's a good reason to maybe select it from the predetermined options. Click apply and click OK. So again, we have 0.4, so 40% is awesome. 20% is so-so. And if it's below 20%, then our KPI is bad. So that's basically what this says. If profit ratio greater than 40%, then awesome. Else if profit ratio greater than or equal to 20%, and this will stop at 40%. This automatically knows it's basically 22.03999999. But then this will take over at 40%. And then this is basically everything else below 20%. Okay, so click OK. Now you should have this profitability KPI under measures. And we're going to use that KPI throughout the dashboard. So let's create this profit by items graph. Drag profit into columns. Profit is here. And then drag profit ratio, the one that we made, into rows. You can also delete this one if you don't want it. We'll just kind of keep it. So we're using profit ratio into rows. So now we have these percentages that we can see here. So drag product name into the detail box. So we want to do it by product name into details, just to give this, because before we didn't really have anything. We just had 12%. Product name into details. Now we have a little bit better, and we can have a little bit better understanding of our KPIs, because before, if you looked at it, it was only at 13%, and that's all pretty low, but it's only one data point, basically. So when you create the product name, you want to give it the graph more data. So let's drag profit name into the details there. and drag the KPI. So last time we created color with KPI. Here's our profitability KPI. Of course, this would work if you did the other one as well, but let's use the one we actually created. You would have to change the numbers to % also for it to work properly. So drag profitability KPI into color. And it's starting to look pretty good. So if you notice, the labels awesome, horrible, and so-so. So hopefully your graph looks something like this. And again, if you've watched my previous videos, I don't really like these colors. So I'm going to go with the red, yellow, and green. So we're going to do awesome. We're going to go with green. And whichever green really suits you, you can choose. Maybe I'll do a little brighter green. Horrible. And these are alphabetical. So horrible is red. I'm going to choose this kind of red. So-so, we'll do yellow. So scroll down. So color palette. So it's kind of hard for me to find a color here. So I would just experiment with these. There's this traffic light. So why don't we change awesome back to this color green, horrible to this color red. I mean, you can do whatever colors you want, of course, and so-so to this color yellow. But these are really meant for red, yellow, green. Click apply and click OK. So now you can see kind of a distinct red means bad, yellow means so-so, and green means really good. So we're getting there with our KPIs. You can select the size of the circles. So if you want to make the circles a little bit bigger for user friendliness, fit width is always pretty good. Entire view, there you go. Now let's give our graph a little bit of text because I think it's screaming for some context. So drag product name into the text box on the marks card. So let's find customer name, product name right here. So let's drag that into the text or into the label. And now we can actually see these are the different products. So gives it a little bit more text. If you want to leave this checked, allow labels to overlap, doesn't really change. That's too much text. It's like all the text. So just leave it as it is. I was just experimenting with editing. You can also change the alignment and the font and everything if you want to right there. So we already saved this by profitability by item. I'm going to go ahead and just label it profitability instead of profit by items. And this is a pretty simple way to create a scatter plot KPI, red, yellow, green, green being awesome, red being horrible, and yellow being so-so. So let's create another graph. So I'm going to create a, like I said before, a profitability details. Visualization. So a little bit more detailed KPI. So drag segment and category into rows. And where's category into rows? Now we get this nice little table. Drag order ID into rows next to category. You can also double click. So if we go back, it just, oops, that just goes there. So I guess you can't go double click. Sorry about that. I'm just going to add all members. And now we need to add some data here, so we need some measures. So let's just quickly add some. So double-click sales, double-click profit, and then double-click your profit ratio that you calculated. And now we want to add the profitability KPI that we made. So drag that into the color button, just like we did before. And notice that this actually makes the profit ratio and the sales green, yellow, or red based on the threshold. So green, awesome, horrible, and so-so. And then save this. We already saved this as profitability details. And now we can have a really easy way to notice the red, green, and yellow based on the profit ratio category, basically. So this here, this is red because it's looking at the profit ratio that we created as horrible. If you wanted to sort it by all greens, you can just push this tiny little graph button here, green, and this is by category here. So you can do that if you want to. And then we already saved the name, so let's create another graph, profitability by subcategory. By subcategory. All right, now drag subcategory into rows. Now you have all these little subcategories. Now we want to add some numbers here. So profit, and I just double click that, and then profit ratio. Basically, we want to make, now I'm going to start to add something called a quick table calculation. There are different options for doing quick table calculations if you didn't know that, so that we don't have to really create another calculated fields. So I want to create something of percent of our profit. So in the measures over here, next to profit, not over here in the marks card, measure values for profit, I'm going to change this. So you can change this to sum, average, median, count, maximum. I'm going to change this to percentile, and we want to calculate basically the percent of profit, so we can show the percent of profit alongside our profit ratio. So what I'm going to do is create a calculated field for, so again, this is, I'm sorry, this is how to change to a lot of different minimum, maximum, sum, different formulas. And what we're really wanting is a quick table calculation and not changing the actual measure. So I'm going to change this to percent of total. So that gives us basically a graph that kind of says what category is measuring the percent of the profit next to accessories, and then giving our profit ratio, which again, we created that calculation as relative to sales, so profit and sales, what percent of profit and what profit ratio. So for like, you know, phones make up 15% of our profit and 13% of our profit ratio, that's pretty good, right? 14%, 25. This one is negative percent and negative profit ratio, so that's not very good. Okay, so it's hard to read this data, of course, and we're going to make a KPI. So hopefully you created that quick table calculation, and then also I showed you a little bit how to change this measure into sum or average, which I can cover in a different video. So the next thing we want to do is also notice that the label of the columns changed. So you can just drag these over, percent of total And you can change the labels also of these. So edit alias, percent of total profit, a long table down. Let's just change that to here, and then change the label, edit alias, profit ratio. Just remember this is our profit ratio. Percentage-wise, of course, it's a percent, so you should be able to remember that. Now, of course, we have to show the KPI. So you guessed it, drag that into color. Now we can see some pretty good insight. So I said this was good. Apparently this is so based on the profit ratio. So basically it colors it yellow, yellow. This is based on the profit ratio, so it colors everything green as associated with a green profit ratio. So you might want to even make a KPI for percent of total profit also if you're inclined. But I'm going to go ahead forward with this. So save this. We already saved this as profitability subcategory. And hopefully you have something that looks a little bit like this. So I'm just kind of experimenting here. And don't forget to experiment and just not follow along, because it's only the way you're going to learn. So if you just kind of go like this, you can really get very detailed. All I'm doing is clicking these, boom, boom. We're going to keep it a little bit more simple here, but feel free to add stuff and change the way this looks. This is just kind of a suggestion, and hopefully you're learning a little bit of tips and tricks. Okay, now let's create our dashboard. So what I did, there's this middle button here, new dashboard, and we're going to create this dashboard. Let's make this a little bigger. Here. So I just changed the size to generic desktop. I'm on a laptop right now, so I probably defaulted to that, but I like the graphs a little bit bigger. I guess maybe I'm getting old. So creating the profitability KPI dashboard, all you really need to do, remember we created, this is kind of our first graph, so you can just click that, that, and then play around with it. So maybe you can make this floating somewhere. You have some details. Maybe this is a little bit too big. So if you want to move that a little bit over, or make this floating also. And basically floating means you can manipulate it. Make this floating also. And I'm just kind of going off. Make this floating also. This is our label. Maybe profitability by subcategory could go up here, and this is all up to you. I just encourage you to play around with some stuff. These are all numbers, so maybe we'll keep these together and maybe put this here, something like that. There. Keep this kind of wide and vertical because it's a very vertical graph. So with that said, maybe I should create this like that, do this like that, change this a little bit over, make this more vertical. So now it looks a little prettier. And what you can do to save some space is click on these elements and right click, hide title, details, hide title. You might want to actually keep some of these titles because it actually shows you what's going on here. But if you really knew the data well, you would of course probably not need that, but it depends on who you're designing your dashboard for. So know your audience, basically. And here you go. Here's our label. Oops. So you can maybe put that down here. Click out of that. And of course, you can add your own filters. I showed you how to do that in a previous video. You could add a title up here if you wanted to. So if you would drag, for example, this object. Oh, hold on. All right, I mistakenly said drag this blank object. Of course, you drag the text object. And these are floating. So basically what it does is it drags the object right behind everything. So I'm just gonna say quick title, format this however you want to. I'm gonna make this floating as well. So now you can actually see the text. And you feel free to put the title wherever you want it. You could move these down a little bit. And then, usually titles go at the top. Change this formatting. Title, move it over top left. And basically double click that. Profitability KPI Dashboard. You can change the color if you want. Totally up to you. Change the font. So maybe, not wingdings, but I don't know, Gothic, make it look funny. Drag this over. Profitability KPI Dashboard. And a good practice is to say data source and then sample Superstore, Tableau, something like that. Just so people know where your data actually came from. And you don't have to make it big. You can decrease the size here as well. And you, of course, have to pull this down a little bit and readjust these, which is pretty easy to do. So again, this may result in ruining the integrity of your dashboard if that's what you want, but again, hide the title. There you go. All right, so my laptop had a little bit of issue, but overall, that's how you do it. A little title here, create the KPIs, add some filters if you want to your dashboard, and thank you for stopping by, and happy visualizing.